Ambassador Vance smiled at the delegate across the table, even though her feet ached and she had not slept in 37 hours. The smile came easy to her. It came easy to all humans who worked in galactic diplomacy. They learned early that aliens found human expressions fascinating and slightly unnerving. A smile could end a trade war. A frown could start one. The space station Harmony's rest floated in neutral territory, far from any. 3 species had gathered here because they could not stop fighting over a mining belt that contained rare metals. The wanted it. The claimed it. The said their ancestors had blessed it 10,000 years ago, so it belonged to them spiritually if not legally. Had spent 6 days finding a solution that made everyone equally unhappy. That was the mark of a good compromise, her teachers had told her. No one gets everything they want, but everyone gets enough to walk away. The delegate, a large being covered in gray scales, pressed his claw mark to the agreement. The representative, small and furry with too many eyes, did the same. The priest blessed the document with sacred oil that smelled like rotting flowers, then added her own mark. It was done. Another crisis solved by talking instead of fighting. As the delegates left, the paused beside. He stood nearly 3 meters tall and could have crushed her skull with one hand. But he bent down to speak softly, almost respectfully. "You humans," he said, 300 years in the galactic conquered and still you surprise me." "How so, delegate?" "You come from a death world, class 7. Extreme gravity, poison atmosphere, predators everywhere, constant disasters. Your world tried to kill your species every day for millions of years." He tilted his massive head. "Yet here you stand, solving arguments with words, making friends of enemies. Where is the violence your world should have bred into you?" Kept smiling. It was what humans did. Perhaps we evolved past it. Made a sound that might have been a laugh. Perhaps, or perhaps you hide it very well. He walked away, his heavy steps echoing through the corridor. Watched him go. The smile stayed on her face because she had learned long ago that the smile was armor. Behind it, she could think anything she wanted, and no one would ever know. She was thinking about what it said, evolved past violence. It was what the galaxy believed about humanity, the soft diplomats, the friendly traders, the strange death who had somehow become the most civilized species in known space. If only they knew, she thought, if only they understood. Her communication device buzzed against her wrist. She glanced at it, expecting a routine message. Instead, she saw a priority alert from Earth, the highest level, the kind that had not been used in her lifetime. She found a private room and opened the message. The face of Admiral appeared, and his expression told her everything before he spoke a single word. "New Geneva," he said. "The Dominion attacked 6 hours ago. Orbital bombardment followed by ground assault. They killed everyone they found and destroyed everything they touched." Smile finally faded. Her voice came out steady, but something cold was spreading through her chest. "Casualties. 12 million confirmed dead. We're still searching for survivors in the outer settlements, but—" he shook his head. "It was extermination, Ambassador, not conquest. They wanted to send a message." 12 million. She thought of the colony she had visited just 2 years ago. The children in the schools, the farmers in the fields, the scientists in their labs working to terraform the harsh world into something beautiful. Gone, all of them, because they wanted to prove they were not afraid of the tame death. "What is the Conquered's response?" she asked. Admiral's jaw tightened. "The Conquered expresses deep concern and offers condolences. They will not intervene because the Dominion operates outside Conquered jurisdiction. They suggest we file a formal protest." A formal protest. 12 million dead, and the galaxy wanted paperwork. "I understand," said. "What are my orders?" "Return to Earth immediately. All human diplomatic personnel are being recalled. All human traders are closing their operations. All human civilians are leaving conquered stations." "We're withdrawing completely." Yes, Admiral paused. His eyes were hard in a way she had never seen before. The Council has decided. We spent 300 years being good neighbors, Ambassador. We smiled and traded and helped and never once raised our hand in anger, even when we were insulted or cheated or ignored. We thought they would eventually see us as equals. He leaned closer to the camera, and his voice dropped low. They didn't. They saw us as pets, tamed animals performing tricks. And now they have murdered 12 million of our people because they believed we would not fight back. Will we, asked, fight back? The smile that crossed Admiral's face was nothing like the diplomatic smiles had practiced for 20 years. It was older, darker, the kind of smile that came from deep in human history, from a time before civilization, when humans had fought and killed and survived everything their terrible world had thrown at them. Ambassador, he said, we are about to show the galaxy what Earth actually produces, what we chose to hide, what we hoped we would never need to become again. The transmission ended, sat alone in the dark room for a long time. When she finally stood, she looked at herself in the polished metal wall. Her reflection stared back at her. She had been Ambassador Vance for 15 years. Smiling, polite, civilized Ambassador Vance, who solved problems with words and patience. But before she was an ambassador, she had been a soldier. Before that, she had grown up on a colony world where the wildlife hunted humans for sport and the weather could kill in minutes. She had learned to smile as armor, yes, but she had also learned other things, older things, things that every human carried in their blood, no matter how civilized they pretended to be. She left the station that night. The alien delegates were confused. They asked where she was going. They complained that they had more agreements to negotiate. The priest said the spirits were unsettled and asked what was wrong. Smiled at all of them one last time. Nothing is wrong, she said. Humanity just needs to take care of some family business. She did not explain further. None of the humans did. They simply left quietly and efficiently, like guests departing a party without saying goodbye. The aliens did not understand the silence. They did not know what it meant when humans stopped talking. They had never seen it before. They would learn. The city of Geneva had not hosted a full council meeting in over a century. There had been no need. Humanity had spread across 100 worlds, and most decisions were made through communication networks that spanned the stars. The old meeting halls had become museums, reminders of a time when humans had governed themselves from a single planet. Now the halls were full again. Representatives from every human colony filled the ancient seats. Their faces were grim, their voices quiet. The screens around them showed images from New Geneva that made some look away and others stare with cold fury. General stood at the center podium. He was 73 years old, his hair white and his face lined with decades of service. He had spent his entire career hoping he would never have to give this speech. 312 years ago, he began, humanity joined the Galactic Concord. We were young then, new to space travel, surrounded by species who had been among the stars for thousands of years before we even discovered fire. He looked around the room at the faces of his people. They told us we were Death, Class 7, they said, one of the harshest planets ever to produce intelligent life. They expected us to be violent, brutal, dangerous. He paused. And they were right. We were all of those things. Our history proved it. We had spent killing each other over land and religion and resources and simple hatred. The room was silent. Everyone knew this history. Every human child learned it in school. But we made a choice, General continued. When we reached the stars, we decided to be different. We decided to be the version of ourselves we wished we had always been. Kind, patient, helpful. We would not conquer, we would not threaten. We would be good neighbors, and perhaps the galaxy would eventually accept us. He touched a control, and the screens changed. They showed human diplomats shaking hands with alien leaders, human traders sharing meals with foreign merchants, human doctors treating diseases on distant worlds, human engineers building infrastructure for species who had mocked them behind their backs. For 300 years we smiled. We helped. We turned the other cheek when we were insulted. We walked away from fights we could have won. We let smaller species believe they were our equals and greater species believe they were our betters, all because we thought patience and kindness would earn us respect. The screens changed again. New Geneva, the burned cities, the mass graves, the empty schools where children had once learned and laughed. We were wrong. General's voice hardened. The gentle old man who had greeted delegates and signed treaties seemed to vanish. In his place stood something older, something that remembered what humans had been before they decided to be civilized. They did not attack New Geneva because they feared us. They attacked because they did not fear us at all. They looked at 3 centuries of human kindness and saw weakness. They watched us smile and help and trade, and they decided we were prey. He let that word hang in the air. Prey, the worst insult a death could receive. The Galactic Conquered will not help us. They have made their position clear. Humanity must handle this alone. He smiled then, and it was not a kind smile. Good, this should be handled by family. He gestured, and the screens changed once more. What appeared made several delegates gasp. Others leaned forward with expressions of grim satisfaction. Ships, hundreds of ships, not the small patrol vessels humanity used for border protection, not the merchant freighters that carried trade goods across the galaxy. These were warships, massive, armored, bristling with weapons the conquered had never seen. "Did you think we forgot how to fight?" General asked. "Did you think we threw away our teeth when we learned to smile? No, we simply hid them. Every generation we built. Every decade we improved. We created shipyards in hidden systems. We stockpiled weapons in secret facilities. We developed technologies we hoped we would never need to use." More images appeared. Ground forces in advanced armor. Atmospheric fighters designed for death-world conditions. Orbital platforms that could crack a planet's crust. We prepared for this day because we knew it might come. We knew that someday someone would mistake our kindness for weakness. Someone would decide that the tame death were easy targets. His eyes swept the room. They made that mistake. They will not make it twice. A delegate from the outer colonies raised her hand. She was young, barely 30, and she had lost family on New Geneva. "General, what exactly are you proposing?" "I am proposing that we stop pretending," he replied. "For 300 years, we have hidden what we truly are. We have smiled and bowed and let the galaxy believe we evolved past our nature. But we did not evolve past anything. We simply chose not to use it." He looked directly at her, and his voice became almost gentle. "Every human alive carries the inheritance of a death world. We are the children of a planet that tried to kill us with ice ages and volcanic winters and predators and plagues. We survived all of it, not because we were the strongest or the fastest, but because we were the most relentless. We do not give up. We do not forgive. We do not forget." He turned back to the full council. They wanted to learn what kind of beings grew on Earth. They wanted to see what a Class 7 death world produces. They murdered 12 million innocent people to satisfy their curiosity. General pressed a button on the podium. Across human space, in hidden facilities and secret bases, systems began activating. Ships powered up. Soldiers received their orders. An entire civilization that had pretended to be peaceful for 3 centuries began to remember what it really was. "Let us give them exactly what they asked for," he said. "Let us show them what a death world truly produces, not the mask we wear for the galaxy, not the smile we use to make others comfortable. The real thing, the true thing, the humans that survived Earth." The vote was unanimous. Not a single voice spoke against it. Not a single hand was raised in opposition. That night, on worlds across human space, people gathered with their families. They spoke of ancestors who had fought in wars that most species could not imagine. They remembered songs that had not been sung in generations. They prayed to gods they had almost forgotten. And then they prepared for what was coming. They had poked what they thought was a sleeping pet. They were about to discover it was a sleeping wolf. They were not worried. Their military commanders had studied humanity for decades. They knew everything important about the soft diplomats from the death world. Humans were physically capable but poorly trained. Their military was small and defensive. They had no experience with real warfare since joining the conquered. They would send a few ships, make angry speeches, perhaps destroy some border outposts. Then they would return to their negotiations and their trade agreements because that was what humans did. They talked. They never truly fought. War Leader stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the border with human space. His scales were dark red, a sign of his noble bloodline. His claws were filed sharp, ready for combat. He had personally led the assault on New Geneva and had watched the colony burn from orbit. It had been easy, too easy. The humans had barely resisted. Their security forces had fought hard but died fast. Their civilians had run and screamed and begged, just like the prey species of old, had almost been disappointed. War Leader, his sensor officer reported, human ships are approaching the border. Leaned forward, interested, how many? The officer was silent for a moment, then another moment. Then he turned around and his scales had gone pale. All of them, War Leader, all of them are coming. The screens lit up with contact markers. Hundreds of ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of space. They came in formation, precise and perfect, moving as one massive force. These were not the patrol vessels had expected. These ships were monsters, dreadnoughts covered in armor that should have been too heavy to move, carriers that launched fighters in swarms like angry insects, destroyers that moved faster than anything their size had a right to move. "What are those?" demanded. "Those are not human ships. Humans do not have ships like that." "They match human energy signatures, War Leader. They are definitely human." A transmission came through. Opened it, expecting angry words and demands for surrender. He was prepared to laugh at them. A human woman appeared on screen. She wore a military uniform had never seen before, dark gray with red markings. Her face was calm. Her eyes were not. "I am Admiral Sarah of the United Human Federation," she said. "You killed 12 million of our people. You destroyed one of our worlds. You did this because you believed we would not fight." She leaned closer to the camera. "You believed wrong." The transmission ended. The human fleet began to move. Ordered his forces to engage. He had 200 warships ready. The humans had perhaps 300. Those were acceptable odds for warriors. The battle lasted 4 hours. It should have lasted days. Human ships did not fight like any species in the galaxy. They did not form careful lines and exchange fire at safe distances. They charged directly into the formation, taking damage that should have destroyed them and kept coming. They targeted engines first, leaving ships stranded, then finished them at leisure. Warriors were proud of their ferocity. They had conquered 12 species. They feared nothing. They learned to fear humanity that day. When the battle ended, 173 ships were destroyed or disabled. The humans had lost 8. Retreated to a nearby system, calling for reinforcements. His second-in-command approached, wounds still bleeding from shrapnel damage. "War Leader, how is this possible? The humans we studied were weak. These are not the same species." "They are the same species," said slowly, understanding dawning in his mind. "We simply never saw the real ones before." The humans did not stop at the border. They pushed deeper into space, taking system after system. Each battle was the same. They fought with everything they had, and the humans simply refused to lose. Ground combat was even worse. Soldiers were larger and stronger than humans. In theory, they should have won every fight, but humans did not fight fair. They used terrain in ways that seemed impossible. They attacked at night in storms in conditions that should have killed them. They kept fighting with wounds that should have stopped them. They would not stay dead. A commander captured a wounded human marine during one battle. He demanded to know what the humans were and how they could do these things. The marine, a young woman with one arm torn off at the elbow, looked at him and smiled. It was the same smile they had seen on human diplomats for centuries. But now, covered in blood and surrounded by enemies, the smile meant something very different. "You wanted to meet real death," she said. "Now you have. How do you like us?" She died before she could be questioned further. Her companions found her body 3 hours later when they took the compound. They buried her with honors and then continued their advance. The Galactic Conquered watched from a safe distance. Observation posts on neutral territory recorded everything that happened. Alien diplomats and military leaders gathered to study the footage, and they did not like what they saw. For 3 centuries, they had believed humanity was domesticated. They had laughed at humans behind their backs. They had considered them useful but harmless, like trained animals performing tricks for food. Now they watched human soldiers fighting in toxic atmospheres without protection. They watched human ships taking damage that would cripple any other vessel and continuing to fight. They watched humans refuse to surrender, refuse to retreat, refuse to die. The delegate, who had once asked Ambassador Vance where humanity's violence had gone, watched a recording of a human assault force taking a fortress. The humans lost 2/3 of their troops in the attack. The survivors did not pause. They did not mourn. They simply continued until the fortress fell. "They were hiding," said quietly. "All this time, they were hiding what they truly are." "Can we stop them?" another delegate asked. Was silent for a long moment. Then he shook his massive head. "I do not think anyone can stop them," he said. "I do not think anyone ever could. They simply chose not to show us until now." Across the galaxy, other species began making preparations. Not to fight humanity. No one wanted that. They prepared to ensure that they never, ever gave humans a reason to turn that terrible focus on them. The wolf was finally awake, and the galaxy was learning to be afraid. The war lasted 6 weeks. By the end, the Dominion had ceased to exist as a military power. Admiral stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the planet below. Prime, the of the species that had murdered New Geneva. Millions of lived on that world, in cities that stretched across continents and reached toward the sky. Her orders were clear. Her mission was specific, but she took a moment to think about what she was doing and what it meant. "Admiral," her second-in-command said, "the ground forces are ready. We can begin the assault at your command." She nodded slowly. "What is the status of the civilian population?" "Evacuating to the southern continents as instructed. We have opened humanitarian corridors. Most are using them." "Good, continue the evacuations. We do not kill civilians who are running away." Some of her officers had questioned this approach. They had not offered such mercy to New Geneva. They had killed everyone, including children, including the elderly, including people who had tried to surrender. Why should humanity show kindness that was never shown to them? Admiral had a simple answer. Because we are not them, because we decide who we are, not our enemies. The assault began at dawn on the Prime. Human forces targeted military bases, government buildings, and weapons factories. They destroyed everything that could be used to wage war. Ships in orbit burned. Defense platforms crumbled. Armies that had conquered a dozen species fell before soldiers who had come from a world far more dangerous than any they had ever known. The leadership tried to surrender on the 3rd day. A delegation approached the human lines carrying white flags, demanding to speak with whoever was in charge. Admiral met them on the ground, surrounded by human marines in full combat armor. The delegates were surprised. They had expected another human to be leading the land forces. They had not expected the fleet commander herself. "We offer unconditional surrender," the lead delegate said. He was old for his scales faded to a pale pink. "We will accept whatever terms you require. We only ask that you spare our people." Looked at him for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was flat and cold. "Did the people of New Geneva ask you to spare them?" The delegate flinched. "That was a decision made by war leader. He acted alone. We did not authorize." "Is dead," interrupted. "We killed him 2 days ago when we took his fortress. His entire command staff died with him. We found recordings of his communications. Your government authorized the attack. Your council approved the extermination order. Your people celebrated when the news arrived." The delegate had no response. 12 million humans died because you thought we were prey," continued. "You thought 3 centuries of peace meant we had forgotten how to fight. You thought our smiles meant we were weak." She stepped closer, and even though she was smaller than every present, they all stepped back. "You were wrong, and now you will pay the price." "What do you want?" the delegate asked desperately. "Resources, territory, we will give you anything, just name your price." "I want you to remember." She turned and walked back to her lines. Behind her, her Marines raised their weapons. For a terrible moment, the thought they were about to be executed. Instead, the Marines fired over their heads into a statue of a war hero that stood behind them. The statue crumbled into dust. "Every military installation destroyed," said without turning around. "Every warship reduced to scrap. Every weapon factory demolished. Your empire ends today. You will keep your and 3 colony worlds for farming, nothing else. You will be allowed no military force larger than a police department. You will pay reparations to humanity for the next 100 years. And if you ever threaten another species again, we will return and finish what we started." She finally turned to face them. "Those are my terms. Accept them or die. Choose now." They accepted. The occupation lasted 1 month. Human engineers systematically disabled every piece of military technology they possessed. Human soldiers ensured no resistance movements could form. Human administrators set up the reparation payments and established monitoring systems. Through it all, humanity remained precise, controlled. Civilians who stayed in their homes were not harmed. Shops that remained open were left alone. Schools continued to function. Life went on under the watchful eyes of the species that had so badly underestimated. A galactic conquered delegation arrived near the end of the occupation. They demanded a meeting with human leadership. Ambassador Vance, who had returned to service despite her age, agreed to speak with them. The conquered representatives were furious. Humanity had violated treaties. They had waged a war of conquest. They had destroyed a member state without authorization. Vance listened to their complaints with a patient smile. When they finished, she spoke calmly. "Though we're not a member of the conquered, you said so yourselves when you refused to help us. They were outside your jurisdiction. That means this matter was also outside your jurisdiction." "You have destabilized the entire region," a delegate protested. "Other species are afraid. They do not know what you will do next." "Good," Vance said simply. "They should be afraid, not of us but of what happens when someone hurts us. We spent 300 years being peaceful. We asked for nothing but fair treatment. And when we were attacked, you offered us paperwork." She stood and looked around the room at the alien faces. Some were angry, some were scared. Some looked at her with something almost like respect. "We no longer require the conquered's approval for anything. We will trade with you if you want. We will talk with you if you want. But we will never again pretend to be less than we are." She walked toward the door, then paused. "One more thing. They attacked us because they thought we were safe to attack, because you all thought we were tame, because for 300 years you laughed at us and dismissed us and treated us like performing animals." Her voice hardened. "That was a mistake. Not ours, yours. The next species that makes that mistake will learn the same lesson they learned. I suggest you remember that." She left without waiting for a response. Behind her, the conquered delegates looked at each other in silence. They had no answers. They had no solutions. They only had fear and the dawning understanding that the galaxy had fundamentally changed. The humans were going home. The war was over. But nothing would ever be the same. 5 years passed. The galaxy healed slowly, like a wound that would always leave a scar. The galactic conquered still existed, but it was smaller now. Many species had quietly withdrawn, uncomfortable with an organization that had failed so completely when one of its members needed help. They did not blame humanity for what happened. They blamed themselves for allowing it to happen. Humanity had not rejoined. They saw no reason to. Instead, they had formed something new. The compact began with a message from a species called the. They were massive beings from a high-gravity world, 4 times Earth's pull. They had spent centuries pretending to be slow and stupid because the galaxy feared what they might do if they showed their true capabilities. After watching humanity's war, they stopped pretending. Other species followed. They from a world of constant volcanic activity where the air itself could kill most oxygen breathers. The Hollow, who lived on a planet so cold that their blood was filled with natural antifreeze. The whose was bathed in radiation that would destroy most organic life within hours. All of them had been hiding. All of them had been pretending to be less than they were. And all of them had watched humanity and thought the same thing. If they can stop pretending, so can we. Ambassador Vance, now 82 years old and walking with a cane, gave the inaugural address when the compact was formally established. She stood before representatives of 17 species, beings that had survived conditions the rest of the galaxy considered impossible. "We all made the same mistake," she said. "We thought that if we were kind enough, patient enough, civilized enough, the galaxy would accept us. We hid our strength because we were afraid of being feared. We pretended to be soft because we thought that was what peace required." She looked around the room at faces that could not have been more different from each other, but all shared the same understanding. "We were wrong. Peace does not require weakness. Kindness does not require helplessness. We can be exactly what our worlds made us and still choose to be good. The choice is what matters, not the capability we deny, but the capability we possess and choose not to use." The compact grew stronger over the following years. They did not threaten anyone. They did not demand tribute or territory. They simply existed, a reminder that the galaxy's civilized species were surrounded by beings far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. They survived. Their empire was gone, their military destroyed, their pride shattered, but their people lived. They farmed their remaining worlds. They raised their children. They rebuilt what they could. And they became humanity's most devoted advocates. The who had fought in the war told their children stories. They described humans who would not stop, would not surrender, would not break. They talked about soldiers who showed mercy to civilians even while destroying armies. They spoke of a species that could have burned their entire civilization to ash and chose not to. "They are the most dangerous beings in the galaxy," a historian wrote in a famous essay. "And they do not want to be. That is what makes them terrifying. That is also what makes them wonderful. They have every reason to be monsters and every ability to be monsters, but they refuse. Every single day they refuse." On the rebuilt world of New Geneva, a memorial stood at the center of the capital city. 12 million names were carved into black stone that would never fade. People came from across human space to read the names and remember. An old woman brought her granddaughter there on a warm spring day. The woman had survived the original attack. She had been off-world when they came. She had lost her husband, her parents, her siblings, and her friends. She had spent 5 years rebuilding what she could. The little girl looked at the endless names with wide eyes. She was too young to understand what they meant. too young to know the weight of history that surrounded her. "Grandmother," she asked, "why did they hurt us?" The old woman was silent for a moment. "How did you explain hatred to a child? How did you describe evil that had no reason except cruelty?" "They thought we were weak," she finally said. "They thought we would not fight back. But we did fight back. Yes, we did. Did we win?" The grandmother thought about that question. They had destroyed the military. They had dismantled an empire. They had earned the fear and respect of an entire galaxy. By every measure, they had won. But 12 million people were still dead. Her husband was still gone. The life she had planned was still destroyed. "We survived," she said. "Sometimes that is the best kind of winning there is." A conquered diplomatic ship arrived at Earth a few weeks later. It was the first official visit since the war. The ambassador aboard was a young female, the daughter of Delegate, who had died of old age 2 years before. She had been sent to request that humanity rejoin the conquered. The organization needed them, she was told. The galaxy was not stable without them. Ambassador Vance met her in a small garden outside the diplomatic building. They sat together on a bench, watching birds fly between trees that had grown for centuries. "Your father asked me once where humanity's violence had gone," Vance said. "Do you remember that?" "He told me about it," the young replied. "He said you smiled and said you had evolved past it." "I lied." Vance watched a sparrow land on a nearby branch. "We never evolved past anything. We simply learned to control it. Every human alive carries the same capacity for violence that our ancestors had. We just choose, every day, to be kind instead." "That seems exhausting." "It is, but it is also what makes kindness meaningful. A creature that cannot hurt you is not being kind when it does not. A creature that could destroy you and chooses peace instead, that is true kindness." The young ambassador was quiet for a moment. Then she asked, "Will you rejoin the conquered?" Vance smiled. It was a gentle smile, warm and genuine. The smile of an old woman who had seen too much and was tired of fighting. "Perhaps someday, when the conquered learns that kindness and strength can exist in the same being, when they stop seeing us as tamed monsters and start seeing us as people, when they understand that we were never pretending to be civilized. We were always civilized. We were also always dangerous. Both things were true." She stood slowly, leaning on her cane. "Go home. Tell your leaders what you have seen here. Tell them that humans are exactly what we have always been: friendly, helpful, patient, and absolutely, completely, terrifyingly capable of destroying anyone who hurts our people." She paused at the garden gate and looked back. "Tell them we would rather be friends. We have always preferred friendship, but friendship must be chosen, not demanded, and it must be given to equals, not granted to pets." The young returned home. She delivered her report. The conquered debated and argued and eventually did nothing, as they so often did. But something had changed. When conquered species talked about humanity now, they used different words. Not tame or domesticated or safe. They spoke of humans with respect, sometimes with fear, always with the understanding that the smiling diplomats and friendly traders were something far more complex than they appeared. On Earth, life continued. Children went to school, farmers grew crops, scientists made discoveries, artists created beauty. Humans did what they had always done. They lived, they loved, they built, and they hoped for a better tomorrow. And in the quiet corners of their minds, in the deep places where instinct lived, they remembered what they were capable of. They remembered the war. They remembered the wolf that slept inside them. They hoped they would never need to wake it again. But if they did, they knew it would answer. It always had.